Hello everyone, welcome to A Clear Perspective. I'm Serene. September 5th, Judge Aileen Cannon granted former President Trump's request for a special master review of the material confiscated by the Biden DOJ during their raid on his home at Mar-a-Lago. Judge Cannon also temporarily enjoins or forbids the Justice Department from reviewing and using the seized materials pending the completion of the review. This is not only a significant and substantial victory for Trump, but also a disruption of the Justice Department's deployment before midterm elections. It seems that Democratic bigwigs had been carefully designed to carry out a Russiagate 2.0 before midterm elections. The FBI's Trump-Russia investigation started in 2016. During the process, internal information was purposely leaked to media. Leftist media then made a big deal out of it, which damaged Trump's reputation and misled voters. The raid on Mar-a-Lago follows the same pattern. First, someone leaked classified nuclear documents to the Washington Post. Then FBI released a staged photo that the whole world saw. Then the leftist media was talking about it day after day. This publicity could be very damaging to Trump. Cannon also mentioned the potential reputational harm of Trump in relation to the investigation in her ruling. The former advisor to President Clinton and Trump, Dick Morris, told Newsmax that the FBI's raid of Trump's private residence in Mar-a-Lago was the first attempt to stop Trump from running in 2024. Biden's Thursday speech was second. Third, I think it's going to be a grand jury indictment of Donald Trump for the crime of not returning his library books, which is essentially what he did with the archives. The archives are essentially a library. His books were overdue. Apparently, Judge Cannon's ruling stopped the DOJ from indicting Trump before midterm elections. Next, let's talk about Biden's speech. During the Soul of the Nation speech, Biden said, Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundation of our republic. A recent poll shows that a large majority of Americans, nearly 60%, say Joe Biden's recent primetime speech was designed to incite conflict. The poll was conducted by Convention of States and the Trafalgar Group. President of the Convention of States, Mark Meckler, said, "These numbers reveal that most voters were sickened and deeply disturbed by what they saw last week. When you couple this finding with previous polling we did, indicating a majority of voters also hold President Biden responsible for America's divisions. It is clear that the man who promised to unite the nation has become the most divisive president in American history." The poll was done September the 2nd to the 5th and surveyed more than 1,000 likely 2022 election voters. The poll revealed 56.8% of voters believe President Biden's recent primetime address to the nation, in which he accused his political opponents of representing an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic, represents a dangerous escalation in rhetoric and is designed to incite conflict amongst Americans. Key to the results was that 62.4% of independent voters disliked Biden's rhetoric, joining 89.1% of Republicans and 18.7% of Democrats. Fox commentator Tucker Carlson called the speech in Pennsylvania as a turning point in American history. He said, "You don't have to be a Trump voter to see a speech like this as a turning point in American history." For hundreds of years, the U.S. has had a political system comprised of two competing parties. If you declare one party criminal, what would you be left with? You would be left with a one-party state. That's what Joe Biden is calling for tonight. A one-party state is shocking. Next, I want to talk about the U.S.-China audit agreement. September the 2nd, a senior Chinese securities regulatory official said that China will implement an audit agreement with the United States and will strengthen communication with foreign investors. Media reports that the agreement between China and the United States will allow U.S. regulators to vet accounting firms in mainland China and Hong Kong, potentially ending a long-running dispute that threatens to banish more than 200 Chinese companies from U.S. exchanges. On the surface, Xi Jinping made a big concession to Biden. Many people are impressed by Biden because of this. They think he has done what Trump failed to do. Is that really the case? Probably not. On August 26, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, PCAOB, announced a framework agreement with two authorities in China, the China Securities Regulatory Commission, CSRC, and the Ministry of Finance. This is a preliminary agreement. It should make it possible for the PCAOB to inspect the auditors for the 200-plus Chinese companies with U.S. listings. Previously, China had been reluctant to grant such access, citing national security concerns. In January 2020, Congress passed the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act. The law requires that foreign companies with U.S. listings use auditors that the PCAOB is able to inspect or be delisted. Thus, Chinese companies not compliant with U.S. audit rules will be prohibited from trading on U.S. exchanges by 2024. U.S. regulators have selected e-commerce majors Alibaba Group Holding and JD.com among U.S.-listed Chinese companies for audit inspection starting this month under the agreement. Meanwhile, legal experts and China watchers warn the two sides could still clash over how the accord is interpreted and implemented. Personally, I have serious doubts if this agreement will be implemented at all. U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Gary Gensler said, "This agreement will be meaningful only if U.S. regulators actually can inspect and investigate completely audit firms in China." The dispute over audits of Chinese companies dates back more than a decade. Especially under the Trump administration, sanctions have been frequently imposed. In 2013, the Obama administration and the Chinese side signed Memorandum of Understanding on Law Enforcement Cooperation, the core of which is the U.S. side has access to the audit work papers of Chinese companies. However, the U.S. side can only have access to documents that have been reviewed by the Chinese Communist authorities. The U.S. cannot conduct regular on-site inspections of Chinese audit firms. Therefore, this Memorandum of Understanding is essentially a collaboration between the Obama administration and the CCP to fool the American public. In 2016, the Obama administration and the CCP reached another Memorandum of Understanding. However, the U.S. PCAOB is still unable to obtain relevant documents in a timely manner. So, Obama was playing stalling tactics on this issue. And I'm afraid this is what the Biden administration is doing now. So far, scores of Chinese companies were suspended or kicked off U.S. exchanges, most of them for failing to file timely financial reports. At least 24 were hit with SEC fraud or accounting charges. But investigations stalled because the company's audit papers were in China, beyond the SEC's reach. So far, a growing number of U.S.-listed Chinese firms have conducted secondary or primary listings in Hong Kong to mitigate the impact of possible delistings in the U.S. It is worth noting that the PCAOB requires complete access in its ability to investigate Chinese auditors. However, officials from China's Securities Regulatory Commission have different interpretations on this agreement. In a press conference regarding China-U.S. Audit Oversight Cooperation Agreement, an official said, quote, "The agreement establishes a framework for regulators from both countries to carry out regulatory cooperation in inspecting and investigating audit firms within their jurisdiction in accordance with applicable laws. Audit work papers and other information that the U.S. regulator need access to will be obtained by and transferred through Chinese regulators." This implies that even though U.S. want to see all the audit paper, China will only provide what they want to provide to the PCAOB. On one hand, the U.S. and China have reached an agreement. However, on the other hand, both sides are not giving in at all. There is a popular saying in the market: the Chinese companies would rather be delisted than turn over the audit papers. So why came out this preliminary agreement? Probably for the midterm elections. Biden and the Democratic Party are the biggest beneficiaries of this agreement, which came out right before the midterm elections. It will boost voters' support for them. On the other hand, without the cooperation of Xi Jinping, Biden's plan will not work out either. The Chinese Communist Party understands very well the significance of the U.S. midterm elections. It is also very clear that the Republicans may win back the Congress. It is in the interests of the CCP to have Biden and the Democratic Party to maintain power. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.